Hey guys, Jared here, and today we're going to be working on how to make a custom header view for your table view sections. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is just head over here to Xcode, create a new Xcode project, and then this is going to be a single view application. Go ahead, click next. Product name, I'm just going to go ahead and call this my header view. And then for our language, we're going to set that to Swift, devices universal. Now go ahead, click next, and create. And now that we're inside of our project, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the main.storyboard here. Let's go ahead and delete the view controller that's on there, and we're just going to go ahead and add a table view controller onto the scene like so. And now that we have this table view controller on our scene, we also want to make sure that it is the initial view controller. That way it's the first view controller that loads up. Then also with this, I'm going to go ahead and make my prototype cell just larger. I think that just gonna give it a cooler look, and I'm also gonna change the background color so that we can accentuate the headers so that we can see them a little bit better. So I'm just turning the background to black so that we're able to see exactly what those headers look like. So yeah. And then now that we have our cell all set up, I'm gonna go over here to my attributes inspector, identifier. I'm gonna go ahead and call this my cell. That way we can reference it later on inside of programming. And I think that's pretty much it for our table view inside of our main.storyboard. So let's go ahead, go back over here to our viewcontroller.swift. And the thing that I want to do in here is just go ahead and change this. So the class of this is equal to a table view controller with the superclass right here of a UI table view controller. And I think that's all good. Now once we have all that set, we're going to hit Command S to save this project file. Then we can go back over here to our main.storyboard. And the thing I want to do with this table view controller now is apply that class that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this view controller, head over here to my identity inspector, go to the class, and I'm going to just type in my table view controller. And that should be good. Now our table view controller can be manipulated by the viewcontroller.swift file that we have. Now the next thing we need to do before we populate everything, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into creating our header. So the way I'm doing this is I'm going to say File, New, File, and then this is going to be a Cocoa Touch class, say Next, and then for our class here, I'm going to go ahead and call this my header view. And then for the subclass of, we're going to go ahead and make sure that this is the subclass of a UI table view cell. Now, you might be wondering why not a UI view? I feel like this one works the best, but honestly, it's just creating a view and we're applying that towards our project. I think the main pointer for me is if it's a UI table view cell, then we know that it's going to be the exact same width as the header. So that's what I'm doing there. And then also down here, you want to make sure that this also create nib file is selected. Now let's go ahead and say next and create. And now you'll see that we have our headerview.nib file here and our headerview.swift file here. So inside of our headerview.nib file here, I'm going to go ahead and add a few elements onto it. So I'm going to add an image view like so, and I'm also going to add a label onto the scene as well. Let's go ahead and resize our UI image view to the proper sizing. I'm just going to make it a nice like square size, making sure that the height and the width are the exact same thing. So I'm going to go over here to my size inspector. With the width, I'm going to say 43, height 43. That is all good. I'm just giving it a 1:1 aspect ratio, and that's how I want it. And then now that we have that, I'm going to position everything accordingly. And also with this, I want to make sure that we maintain aspect ratios and such. So what I'm going to do is right click and drag from my image view to my image view and just say maintain that aspect ratio. Now also with this, I'm going to go ahead and right click over to my content view. And I'm going to make sure that we have the leading space. And then we also have the top space and container margin, and as well as the bottom space. And then now we also want to make sure that we have this all properly set up with our label. So with our label, I'm going to go ahead and drag that out to the other edge of the screen. And we're going to go ahead and add a trailing space. And we're also going to add some horizontal spacing between our image view and our label. Now, last thing we need to do is just center vertically in the container, and we are all good to go. Now let's go ahead and apply some of these elements to our header view .swift file, which was created alongside our nib file. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and right click and drag from my image view over to my header view, and I'm just going to go ahead and call this my header image view. Connect that, and then I'm also going to connect my label, and I'm just going to go ahead and call this my header label. Now go ahead and connect that, And now this is going to allow us to reference it later so that we can add elements onto each of the headers individually. So yeah, that's pretty much it for our header view. Now let's go ahead and add stuff onto our table view so that we can actually see what's going on with these header views. So I'm going to go ahead and close up my assistant editor. Now let's go ahead and add some things. Now the next thing I want to do inside of my table view controller is create a structure for the posts. Now we're doing it in the sense of Instagram. So with Instagram, there is a header for every post that contains the person's name and the person's image. Now, if you were creating a header for a list of different items, you would probably handle that a little bit differently. You would probably want to have a separate structure for the header and then a separate structure for your posts. I'm going to combine the two just because, again, we're doing Instagram and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. If you were doing one header for 5 posts, then you might want to rethink your structure. So what I'm going to do first is right above our class right here, we're going to go ahead and create a structure. So I'm going to go ahead and say struct. Our name here will be equal to my post structure. Now for our post structure, I'm not worrying about the content that is inside of each of the cells. So what I'm going to worry about is just the elements that go onto the header view. So I'm going to say var the image colon, and then I'm going to set this equal to a UI image, and then exclamation point, and then we also want a var, and then this will be my name. So this is going to be the name that is displayed on this label. So I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to a string, an exclamation point after that. Now that we have that done, we want to go down here and create an array of that post structure. So I'm going to say var my array of posts will be equal to, and I'm going to say open bracket, close bracket, and this will be my post struct, like so, and then open close parentheses. Now let's go ahead and add some things onto that. So I'm going to go down here inside of my view did load, and I'm going to say my array of posts will be equal to open close bracket, and then inside of here we're going to go ahead and put in our post struct dot init, and then inside of here you're going to be able to add your image and your name. So for our image, we're just going to be using a local image, but if you were grabbing an image, what you would actually want to do is, instead of saying array of posts will be equal to this, you would typically say array of posts after grabbing your image, then you would append certain contents. That's just how things would work in that type of instance. But for us, we're using a local image, so we're going to keep it this way. So the local image that we're going to be using is go over here into our assets.exe assets, and I'm going to click and drag this image in there. It was just the one I had on my desktop. Now let's go ahead and go into my viewcontroller.swift. Then we can go in here to my post structure, our image. I'm going to go ahead and type in image literal, and then I'm just going to go ahead and grab that heart. Now we can go into the name here, and I'm going to go ahead and say my name will be Jared. And then now I'm going to go ahead and copy that post structure, put a comma after it, and paste it. So I have, say, 4 headers. And yeah, there we have it. Now we have our array of posts. Now let's go ahead and add this into our table view. So the way that we do this, we have a lot of functions that we need to call up. So we have table view, cell for row at index path is our first one. Then we also want table view number of rows in section. That's the amount of rows that are going to be in underneath each of these headers. And then also I'm going to say the number of sections. So this is going to be the number of sections inside of this table view. Pretty self-explanatory on that one. But we want to continue on and say my table view. And I also want the height for the header in section. And I believe that is it. So there you have it. Now we have our cell for row at index path, number of rows in section, our number of sections, and also the height for the header in that section. So the first thing, we're just going to go ahead and worry about some of these numbers. So down here, I'm going to go ahead and say my number of rows in section will be equal to return the value of 1. I'm just going to have 1 row in each of those sections. So that's going to be 1 image, or 1 post is going to be for every header. That's just how it's going to work. Then we can go down here to my number of sections. I'm going to say return the value of my array of posts.count. And then lastly, for your height for header in section, what I'm going to do is actually create a public variable up here. I'm going to say var height of header will be equal to, let's say, 44. I think that's what I set it up as inside of my headerview.nib file. And I think that's just a good way to start it out, but you can of course make that larger or smaller if you want. One thing I want to point out though is if you do have this height of header equal to 44 and you change that to say 60, you would actually have to go back over here to your headerview.nib file and also change that height to 60 as well. I've noticed some errors, especially with auto layout, if you didn't do this, so just keep that in mind. Now we can go back over here to our viewController.swift. Then we can go back and again height for header and section. And I'm just going to go ahead and return that value that we just created. So it's the height of header. CG float, open close parentheses around that. It's just going to convert that integer that we have up there to a CG float value. Actually, one way to better do this is you can go var height of header will be colon CG float will be equal to 44. So that just completely fixes that error down there, and that makes things a little bit cleaner. Now let's go ahead and finish up by adding some things onto our cell. So what we're going to do is say let my cell equal my table view.dq reusable cell with identifier. And then this, of course, is going to be, as we created earlier, we have our main.storyboard here. We created the cell, and we gave that the identifier name of capital C cell. Now we can go back over here to our viewController.swift, dq reusable cell with identifier, and we're just going to go ahead and put in my cell. Then we don't really need anything else other than that, so we can go ahead down here and say return the value of my cell. Then after that, just go ahead and unwrap that value, so you're just going to go ahead and say exclamation point right after that cell, and I think you are all good to go. So let's just go ahead and build and run this and see where we're at. Now here we have it. We actually see that there are headers being displayed on each of the cells, which is what I was going for. Now, as you can see, we didn't put the custom header on yet, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, the way to do this is we go down here and we're going to add one more function called tableview header view for header in section. So this is where we're going to be adding that certain header or that custom header that we created, and we're going to be adding it to that table view header. Now we're also wanting to make sure that says override function. For some reason it keeps messing that up for me, but we can continue on, and we're going to go ahead and add that UI view. So as you can see, it's expecting this return value of that UI view. So the way I'm going to grab this is we need to go ahead and... So how do we grab this? That's a good question. Yes. Now the way I'm going to do this is say let my header view equal, I'm going to set this equal to my bundle dot main dot load nib named, and then we're going to grab it from that load nib named. So as you can see, this bundle right here, we're grabbing it from the main thing inside of our application. So that's the files that we have here, and then we have load nib named. Again, our nib right here is header view.nib file, and there we have it. So now our nib name is just going to be our header view. Our owner, we're just going to say self, and then options will be equal to nil. We don't have any options going on with this. Now the next thing I need to do is grab that specific view outside of my nib file. So the way I'm going to do this is just say dot first, and that should do it perfectly fine. It's just going to grab the first and only view that's inside of the nib file. So yeah, there we have it. Now we have our header view, and then last thing I want to do is say as my header view. So what this is doing is applying this class that we created over here to it. And what that's going to allow us to do is access that header image view and the header label from inside of that header view. So I'm going to say my header view. So this is the lowercase one that we just created right up here. I'm going to say dot, and then now we can access the header image view dot image, and I'm going to set this equal to, and this will be accessing my array of posts, open bracket, close bracket, and we're going to grab it according to the section that we're in. It's kind of like cell for row at index path you would grab for the row. In this case, since we're working with sections, you want to grab that section right there. That's how things work. And then now that we have that, we want to say dot, and then we're just going to grab that image. And now we're loading that image into that header image view, and we're all good to go. Now let's go ahead and apply that name. So I'm going to say my header view dot header label dot text. I'm going to set this equal to, again, my array of posts, open bracket, close bracket, section, and then just say dot name. And now that we're all good to go, we can say return the value of my lowercase header view. There you have it. So we grabbed our header view from that nib file, then we grabbed the elements from inside of that header view, and then now we're returning that header view to the view that it is expecting. Now let's go ahead and build and run this, and we should be able to see that we have our image loading up inside of that header view, and we're all good to go. And there you have it. Obviously this doesn't look the best, but you kind of get the point. So we have this Jared, the heart, and then we're doing that. Now one thing I do want to point out here is although it looks white, the background, as you can see, is actually transparent. So if you want to make it a white background, all you need to do is go back over here to your header view.nib file, click on the view, go over here to your background, and just switch that over to a white color. And you can change the opacity to 0, or 100. I'm going to make it 100 so that it's just a crisp, clear white background. Now let's go ahead and build and run this again, and we should have that white background staying with us as we're scrolling through. And there you have it. So now as you can see, as I'm scrolling through, that header section stays with whatever group we're in. And that follows for each of these cells that we're doing. So that, and as you can see, as we come to here, pushes that other one out of the way, and it follows through. That is exactly how Instagram would do it. Anyway, there you guys have it. That is how you add a custom header view to each of your table view sections. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, be sure to hit that like button down below. It does support me out a lot and lets me know that you want more of these videos. Anyway, have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.